Welcome to the What Do You Do podcast, where I sit down and speak with professionals having honest conversations about their careers, how they got into them, and advice for those looking to follow a similar path. But most of all, telling you, the listeners, what it's really like to do that job. Well, Nate, welcome to the What Do You Do podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, and good to see you again.
Definitely. So for anyone who's listening, I'll give a little bit of a background as to how Nate and I know each other. So way back in, when was it, 2020, when you just landed into the UK from Australia, you reached out to me to try and help you find a position, obviously within the fintech world, trying to transition from a banking background into more of the fintech startup world and space. And we've kind of just stayed in touch ever since. We caught up at Web Summit, didn't we? Which was a good time in Lisbon. And since then, I've just kind of seen your career blossom, I would like to think, obviously now into more of an entrepreneurial, you've obviously started a brand new startup. So I'm really keen to get into all of that and dive into it. So without further ado, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what you do for a living and how you would describe what you do for a living to someone who isn't in your field or industry?
So I don't know what to say besides stress 24/7, but I founded a company that we basically help people list products on multiple platforms like eBay, Depop, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace. So you just list it once with us and it goes out to every marketplace at once. So rather than juggling several different apps, you can just list your products once and it goes out everywhere. So that's what we're building at the moment.
Love that. And so obviously I've seen that you got accepted onto the cohort for Antler, which is pretty awesome springboard into your entrepreneurial journey. So really keen to get into that. But before we do that, let's go right back to the beginning of your career. And obviously you even started your own clothing brand back in 2016. So talk us through your journey from the beginning to now.
So I was in university. I was working at the bank, just in a call center, doing credit card retention or something very niche like that. I was studying commerce, so naturally I just thought that banking was the most appropriate route. My dad was actually a banker, so I kind of just did what he did and joined the bank and stuck it out there. But I've always been really into like streetwear and clothing, and I was always dabbling in sort of brands. So I started a brand when I was about 19, didn't really do much with it, just kind of dabbled in how to start a business. That was with a few friends, but I was working at the bank at the time, and then quit that and went full-time in the bank properly after university and graduated. So I moved from like the customer service side to the lending side, which is a bit more kind of complex. So you can't really do it while you're in university. And then from there, I just fell in love with the suit for a little bit and kind of wearing nice suits and colored socks and colored ties for a couple years, and then quickly moved into business banking after that. But in hindsight, I feel like I was always one of those people that was never really comfortable. And I kind of just, every time I'd get hired, I would be like, okay, what's next? Like, where do I go from here? And I was kind of just probably a big red flag to a lot of the hiring managers when I was jumping from role to role. So I think, looking back in those 7-8 years, I probably had about 12 different jobs. And that was probably a sign that I was meant to be in something a bit more all over the place. I didn't really gel well with kind of sticking to one role. And the traditional banks kind of want you to stick in one role for 2-3 years before you get promoted. And that just really annoyed the hell out of me. And just knowing that you could jump banks and get paid more. And there was this whole like strategy to trying to get your salary, like just that whole scene I just got really tired of after 8 years. And so, I really wanted to jump into fintech. And at the time, there wasn't much happening in Australia. So me and my partner just decided to pack up and move to London, not knowing that COVID was about to hit a month after.
Indeed. I think your timing was unfortunately not the best. But at the same time, it seems like you've made the most of a hard situation. So then obviously you joined Pitch 121, and that was obviously a bit of a pivot.
Yeah, it was actually one other company that I worked for 6 weeks that I just didn't really like. It was a food tech company in customer success. I think I just wanted to like do anything in technology and startups. There was about a good 6 months that I didn't get a job in London because COVID was happening. I think it was very difficult for anyone in the UK to get a job, let alone someone on a 2-year visa. But I mean, in hindsight, it gave me a lot of time to sit back and figure out what I wanted to do as well. I tried to make the most of a difficult situation and ended up getting into, I really just wanted to move into marketing in a tech company. So I found this kind of social media agency that had its own tech and looked really good from the outset. It was my first time in agency and I got to manage a pretty big account. So they took a punt on me there. And I worked at Pitch 1-to-1 for 6 or 7 months. And that was kind of my first longer term UK job. So I found my feet a little bit there. I learned how to work in a little bit of a scrappier team, which was cool. But yeah, again, I think 6 or 7 months later, I was like, what's next? Yeah, it was a bit of that. But then I met Rob and Jamie from Plend on like just off a whim. I think they were looking for a CMO at the time. And Rob's a Kiwi guy, so we kind of bonded over our expat backgrounds. And Plend was obviously a lending company, and I'd been in lending for 5-6 years. So I think they just liked me as a person, and I somehow ended up getting the first marketing hire, even though I hadn't really had much professional marketing experience. And then worked for them for free for like 6 months before coming on board full time.
Nice. And so how did you get introduced to the guys at Plend?
I actually just applied for a CMO role on LinkedIn because they were like the first time founders. I didn't know what they wanted, and it was just an advertisement for like an equity only role. And I was working at a company called WageStream as well at the time, which was my real pivot from that account manager role into fintech. And then it turned out that WageStream was in the same portfolio as Plend was soon to be, and that kind of was a nice layover. But while I was at WageStream, I was working for the guys at Plend for free until they raised their first round, I think 7 or 8 months later, and then left WageStream and went into Plend.
I love that. So you obviously demonstrated that you weren't averse to risk taking, obviously doing an equity only opportunity. And I think the fact that you also applied for a CMO role, even though you hadn't done anything like that before, shows a lot of guts.
At that point, I was just applying for anything and everything. It was just like a spray and pray approach. Like, I think my expat background really shot me in the foot for like applying for jobs in the UK. So I was just kind of like easy apply on LinkedIn. I think I racked up 2,000 job applications on LinkedIn, which was just silly.
Wow. Well, I mean, obviously was obviously a very good opportunity, to be fair, that you landed with Plend, because obviously you then went through the funding rounds with them. Is that right? And obviously got an amazing exposure to, doing a lot of startup-y style roles. So talk us through what you actually did at Plend.
Yeah, I think my role, although it was applied as a CMO role, it really just became a sort of founder associate role. So like, I didn't know this at the time, but obviously Rob and Jamie, like, they hadn't done a startup before, and there are a lot of things outside your job roles that you need to do to run a startup. Like they didn't know how to hire people or set up the operations or to start their marketing or anything. And so I just basically came in, and I probably would consider it more of a founder associate role than anything. And I just kind of picked up where the pieces were that weren't technical, so they weren't out of my scope, but like anything else like to do with the business, I kind of just supported with. So I ended up jumping in pitches, like looking into the pitch deck, and these are all things I've never ever done before, and started like working on campaigns. So I got to really just like learn from scratch how to do things, and it was finally a position that I was being super challenged in, and it was like felt like it was exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah, that was awesome experience. Then we started like getting funding and lending and hiring people. It became like even more exciting. Like, you had to go to Web Summit and get to pitch and actually sort of see the business go from, like, when I was there, there was literally just barely a pitch deck at the beginning. It was just like an idea. They were working from their like bedrooms, and they were still working their full-time jobs and stuff. So I saw it from literally nothing. And for me, that was like the closest experience to a founder as you could possibly get without the kind of pressure. So yeah, that kept me busy for 3 years. And then we ended up getting sponsored, or my partner got sponsored. So I was able to stay with Plend for three or 4 years. and yeah, watched it grow quite a bit.
Love that. So at what point was the business at when you left?
It was December last year. Where were they at? We just launched with ClearScore. So yeah, it was a huge partnership that I was working on for 2+ years that we got over the line. We had a team of almost 20. I hired like the first 4 people. And then we had like we're saving UK people like thousands of dollars in interest every year. So it was just, yeah, it was a really good position. We were B Corp as well when I left. And then what I did was I stuck on board as an advisor for 6 months just to make sure that the handover period was okay, because it ended up being, because my role was so diverse and I was just doing so many, even as head of growth, I was doing more than just the growth side. So I had to like do a pretty long handover with the marketing manager who worked for me and the new product manager that we got on board and a couple other people just to kind of get them up to speed with all the different bits and pieces that I kind of was doing that yeah, we didn't really know who to give it to. So I just came off 6 months advisory 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. And in the end, what did Plend end up actually raising?
Over my time, we raised over 40 million in debt and equity. They are raising again soon, I believe, or maybe raising TBC.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. Great. So then, obviously, your circumstances changed, or you obviously wanted to really tap into that entrepreneurial spirit even more for yourself. So, at what point did you either come up with the idea of Shopfront, and or when did you decide that actually now is the time?
Yeah, I always liked the idea of Antler, even from 2022, I actually reached out to the scouts and was like sussing out what it was about and what the actual, opportunity was and how to get in, because it's pretty like intense interview process as well. Like you need I think thousands of people apply and a handful get in, like 50 or so.
And for those who don't know what Antler is, could you just give people a little bit of insights into what they do?
Yeah, sure. So it's a global venture capital firm, and essentially they run a program where they take in 60 odd individuals who are a mix of technical and business backgrounds. And you basically in this incubator where you try and find a co-founder, come up with a business, validate that business, and then pitch it for 200 grand at the end of the 2-month period. And then obviously not everyone gets that far or gets to the pitch, but if you do and you successfully pitch, then you get your first round of funding, which is technically a small pre-seed round. And they're a global VC, so you get a lot of access to good resource, and they set you up for success for your next rounds. So I actually got into Antler Antler Australia while I was in the UK. So there's Antler actually everywhere. I think there's 11 offices around the world. So I got into Antler Australia, and that was kind of the trigger point for moving to Australia. I've always been like super big in the resale market, like just as a buyer and a seller, just as like a side hobby. Probably going back to when I used to do brands ages ago. And because Plend was like an impact business, so we were B Corp, so we were saving people on interest. I always tried to look at startups with like an impact lens and making sure that whatever I did build or was working with, it had like some sort of flow on impact, which is why we kind of landed on circular economy as like a problem space that we wanted to kind of tackle. And our first instinct, me and my co-founder, who actually met in a couple of weeks before the program, actually, was to build a new marketplace because didn't really like how Depop was operating. Thought that eBay was maybe too broad, and there was, we saw a real gap in the market to build a new marketplace. And as we were like validating, so going through the phase with Antler of like doing a ton of interviews and speaking to like buyers and sellers and really trying to find where the pain points were, quickly realized that buyers didn't actually have any pain points, or if they did, it wasn't really something you could solve with technology. So we really zoned in on the sellers who kept complaining that listing on multiple platforms was a pain, weren't making enough sales on just one platform. They wish they could do more. So all these common themes kept coming up to say that listing was a nightmare, it took so long, and that I don't list on more platforms because it's just a pain. And so we just took that and thought we'd make a much faster way to list your product. So we actually use AI to remove the background, generate all the listing details, and then get it listed on several platforms at once. So we're trying to make that what's 15 minutes to list on one platform down to about 1 or 2 minutes to list on several platforms. That's the kind of selling proposition that we're building. And yeah, we've just been building on that since day one, really. And we actually pitched with Antler once, and they didn't like it at the start because it was too all over the place. So we actually got told no, and we're about to like give up and stop the Antler program because we were just like completely bummed. And then we spent the next 2 weeks really like speaking to even more sellers and trying to build it up a bit more clearly. Pitched again, and it turned out being a really strong pitch. We ended up getting into the due diligence phase with them. So, yeah, I think we just kind of like stuck at it and stuck to our guns. And yeah, that was the birth of Shopfront, really. And 5 weeks later, we pitched at the IC, which was the most intense period of my life. And then, yeah, got the funding the week after, which was cool.
Congratulations. So how much funding did you secure?
I was 225k AUD. So it's enough
awesome.
enough to pay myself a salary and continue working on it properly with my head down.
Love that. Congratulations. That's blooming awesome. And so what's the plan? What are you looking to do with that investment now?
That was in May. So we've obviously been building the product. So we spent a bit of money on development team, and my co-founders like leading on the development. We've been marketing. And actually next week being start of September, we're opening a new funding round. So we'll be trying to raise for our official pre-seed in the next couple of weeks, which is super exciting.
Exciting.
Also very stressful.
So yeah, definitely. So I'm guessing, have you got your minimal viable product, I guess, already constructed? Where are you at with everything?
We actually did an MVP during the Antler process. We kind of done the front end piece where you could upload your photos and generate the product details, remove the background, and get everything ready for like the marketplace. And that was like our test bed for will people interact with the product like this. And we actually had 50 people actually log in and use it. So you had to kind of sign in with Google and create an account, not just kind of sign up. And they were playing around with it. And then we saw a lot of organic traction on like search and everything like that as well. So that was kind of the proof we needed to be like, okay, let's build the back end piece where you can actually get it listed, because that's where the technical challenges are. And so now we're probably past MVP stage, and we're probably about to do a beta launch phase. So by tomorrow, maybe, or early next week, someone would be able to list their product on eBay from the very beginning. So upload a few photos, generate the details, and then list on eBay. Doesn't look the prettiest, but it does what it's meant to, at least on one platform. And then we'll kind of just keep adding marketplaces and keep building on that. And we want to build out an app as well by the end of the year.
Great. And so by the time this podcast is released, it will be launched then. And we'll pop the links in the description for anyone who is interested in checking it out as well.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Stuff. So obviously you're going through funding rounds at the moment, and I'm sure people would love to hear your experience of fundraising from both Plend and also Shopfront. So what what 3 top tips could you give to those who are looking to take part in a fundraise?
Yeah, I would probably say fundraising is pretty akin to like a sales job. So it's not, people just think you go out, you pitch in front of a panel, and then someone just gives you a check. It doesn't really work like that. A lot of the time actually all the time, it's more or less you have to reach out to someone 3 or 6 months before you actually want the money. You essentially take them through the journey with you, and to the point where you're potentially starting to fundraise. They've already seen you progress, and I think that's in their own mind the due diligence phase for them. So they're just checking you out rather than you kind of presenting a pitch deck saying you want money the next day. It's very difficult. Like, it obviously does happen if you're an ex-founder, or you founded like another big company and people know who you are and you have a brand. But if you're a first-time founder, you definitely need to focus on the relationship side a bit more, which isn't something I think most people know. I think you don't think that that's how it works, but it really is all about the relationships, because a lot of the time they're investing in you, not the product. And we hear that all the time.
Absolutely. So how would you recommend people to build that initial rapport, and also how do they identify who to target?
Yeah, I normally look into the portfolio of the VC companies that I'm looking into and try and find synergies there. But the way I kind of position it, which is not just for the purpose of getting the funding, but it's more about getting to know the person and the firm. So as much as you want their money, you also want to work with people who have conviction in your business and can add value. Like the worst would be pitching or grafting so hard to pitch to someone who just doesn't have faith in you or just isn't aligned with what you want to do. So you kind of want these people to like back you from the beginning. And you see it all the time, like the best VC-backed companies have had VCs behind them that are helping drive the kind of next rounds or the success and things like that. It's not just someone who sits in the back and kind of waits for their check to turn into 100x or whatever it is, because that's pretty worthless in the early stages, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for that. So what would you say has kind of been the hardest pill to swallow or lesson to learn throughout your entire journey of your career?
I really struggle with patience, to be honest. Like I've just
Same.
it's a good and a bad thing, but like there are times where you should be patient and there are times where you should just gun for it. And I think identifying which is the right way to go about something is it's not a skill, it's sometimes luck, but it's also just something to be mindful of, because you can be like super eager for every single job and then you just get a bad rap for constantly pivoting roles or just being a pain and not actually learning anything. But on the flip side, you can also get complacent if you don't have that grit and kind of push either. So it's like just navigating that those two sides. I definitely had trouble with that, especially in the bank and some other roles.
How do you identify that? And then what's your process in order to assess?
I'm lucky I don't have to do that now because I don't report to anyone. So it's probably perfect for me right now. But I think I think what helped me was, as soon as getting into a job, trying to get a development plan sorted like immediately, because then you can kind of hold who you're working with accountable for not progressing you. The worst is when you may have been told something in an interview like, oh, we're going to promote you in 6 months, and then 6 months comes and then they're like, oh, well, we didn't actually do XYZ, so it's another 6 months, but here's your business development plan, and you kind of just set yourself back 6 months, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like I think after the bank, I just ended up being super upfront with any of my employers and being like, this is where I want to be in 6 months, this is where I want to be in 12 months. And I think and I did that even when I was hiring at Plend. I made sure that the people I hired did that with me. So it wasn't like we didn't know where they wanted to progress. It was like, it's a two-way street. Like it's not the manager's problem if you weren't proactive in the next steps as much as it is their problem, if that makes sense.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think I was very much of the essence of like, this is what I want to achieve and how do I get there? And then you have the clear steps in order to take to make sure that both of you aren't going to be disillusioned and or upset with the outcome if it doesn't, reach the ultimate outcome that you're looking for. I think that's really good advice. So essentially, tip of the day here, guys, is just to make your managers really clear on what your ambitions are, and they will hopefully help you to do it, because at the end of the day, I'm sure most managers hopefully really want you to succeed. Okay, great. So what was the one career move or decision you made that you thought was risky that turned out to be the best to pay off?
Yeah, working for equity, to be honest. I think joining a startup is super scary to most people, because it's like, what the hell are options? Like, why is my salary 20% less than everywhere else? Like, and are they even going to last the next 3 months? And I think that's like, I didn't even think about that stuff too much when I joined Plend, and there were definitely times where I was even like, is this even going to get anywhere? When I was working for free, I was thinking, like, am I just wasting my evenings like working at a startup? Like, that's like, what's even happening? And then you just kind of, you have to just have enough conviction in the startup to kind of back that. But yeah, I think that was a huge risky move that paid off. And also starting a business obviously was another risky move.
I'd say so. One thing, can you just stop clicking your mouse? I
God,
can
sorry.
hear it clicking quite a lot. It's okay, it's just picking up, on the audio. So I'm like, okay, perfect. And so obviously you've gone through an entrepreneurial journey, I guess, in essence, kind of twice, because you have been equity based as well with Plend, and then obviously you started and launched your own startup, Shopfront. So what do you think is integral to becoming a successful entrepreneur with regards to raising?
I think you kind of need to learn to just not take things personally a lot of the time. I think a lot of the time you're talking to people who think they know everything and don't really know anything. And because you're working on a startup, you take a lot of things personally. And at the beginning anyway, you kind of take everything as a direct attack or something super personal, when really it's just a misunderstanding most of the time, or you just know your space better than the person you're speaking to. So yeah, it's like resilience and perseverance, the classic kind of startup founder traits. I think it's not giving up. I think if you really feel passionate about something, it will probably happen. You just got to like wait for it to eventuate and not give up.
You mentioned earlier about a time when you were at Antler and you were feeling a bit deflated with regards to some of the feedback. So how did you then decide to push on and continue on? What were the things that attributed towards that?
I think for the most part, just didn't fully agree with the decision at the time. So I wasn't really convinced that this wasn't a VC backable idea. So it was basically, we had basically hacked together what Shopfront is now and another idea. And it was kind of, it just looked way too convoluted and messy. And we were just kind of like, okay, what can we do? Yeah, we just like stripped it in half. And then when we stripped away the bit that wasn't really making sense, it was like a epiphany, and I was like, okay, this is much clearer. This makes much more sense. And it was just, and now that's Shopfront, and it's like, well, when we say what we do, it's not like anyone says, oh, why would anyone use that? It's like clear, sounds awesome, I'd use that for the most part, right? It's not like it's not a product that takes 10 years to explain. It's pretty clear cut what we do. I think if we didn't go through that no phase, we wouldn't have ended up in that super clear, clean phase. So yeah, it was just kind of like taking the feedback, but not taking it to a point where you're going to give up. Like kind of just use it as constructive, if anything, rather than like stop doing this right now. And when you're doing a startup, you can kind of take everything as an attack and just stop doing this, not a try something new or have you thought about this sort of situation.
Awesome. Love that. So let's go on to like actionable steps that you'd recommend for those looking to start a startup. So can you just give 3 things that you think are like super key and important for those looking to start their entrepreneurial journey?
Yes, like validate the idea is probably one of the key ones. So I think a lot of people, and we were guilty of this as well. You fall in love with a product and you kind of retrofit a problem to a product rather than finding a problem and then a solution, which is a weird thing to wrap your head around if you've never kind of done that sort of thinking before. But it pays dividends once you start actually building, to know that there's a problem that you're solving rather than just a product that you're building for no reason. So validating is probably one of the most important things. I'd say secondly is probably having a really not strong co-founding team, but like a complementary co-founding team. So often you see like co-CEOs or 2 non-technical founders, where I think it's super important that you're almost a chalk and cheese relationship where there's very little crossover in what you're doing day to day, because when you're trying to move quickly, if there is crossover, you spend more time just in that gray area, figuring out what to do rather than just in your own streams. Like my co-founder and I right now, basically we have one stand up a day, but other than that, it's like I crack on with what I'm doing and he cracks on with what he's doing. And then neither of us challenge the other one's kind of decisions. It's just like that there's literally no overlap in decision making. It's just kind of, I trust you, you trust me, let's just go ahead and do it, and come back at the end of the day and it's like, okay, works. So that's a huge one that maybe people don't really understand. And also more co-founders is not better. Like 2 is probably the best. Like 5 co-founders is just unreasonable. Like it's got to think about equity and things like that as well. So yeah, that kind of relationship is super important.
Okay, great. And so how would you recommend people go out and find a co-founder?
I mean, Antler is a good start, to be honest, because you find your co-founder in Antler. So they purposely kind of create a cohort where there's a mix of like product people, business people, and technical people. So you kind of just yeah, it's a good melting pot to find someone that you can kind of gel with. Other ways I've seen, like the way Plend did it really was to put out an ad for equity, to be honest, and just say I'm looking for this sort of skill. And I've seen that work well before as well.
Love that. Brilliant. Okay, great. And so have you got any recommendations on any resources? So for example, like podcasts, blogs, anything like that that would be really beneficial to those looking to start their entrepreneurial journey?
Stephen Bartlett's podcast is always a good starting point, The Diary of a CEO. Pretty cliche, but that's one that kind of got me into the startup world.
I'm a fan too, to be honest. So that's and so obviously you're going through another fundraise. So for those who might be interested in being part of the fundraise, how can they get involved and what are you looking for?
Yeah, well, I'm always pretty active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We're looking for 800,000 AUD. If you are interested, obviously let me know. We always love to speak to potential angels and even VCs for future rounds. I think our product, we definitely want to expand into the UK pretty imminently. So having feet on the ground in the UK would be super helpful for us. Or if you know anyone in Australia who would be interested in getting involved, obviously feel free to make those intros too.
Look, Nate, it was so great to speak to you. And I really wish you all of the best on your journey with Shopfront. It sounds like an incredible journey you've been on so far. You've obviously got some great experience throughout your career to date to help hopefully propel you into the stratosphere. I wish you all the best with your fundraise and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
No, thanks for having me. It was good catching up again.